The chains around Kira's wrists had rubbed her silver-blue skin raw during the 3-day journey to Zirion Prime. She kept her violet eyes fixed on the grimy metal floor of the slave pen, trying to block out the jeers and crude assessments from potential buyers who peered through the energy bars. The Zilani female had once been Dr. Kira Veltar, a respected xenobiologist with 2 published papers on cross-species botanical adaptation. Now she was lot number 47 in the Zirion Prime slave market. The auctioneer's voice boomed across the crowd, a gravelly Thrakari merchant whose forearms gestured dramatically as he described her fine breeding potential and excellent health markers. Kira's stomach churned. She'd heard what happened to female slaves sold on worlds like this, especially those of her species prized for their supposed docility and exotic appearance. The research colony where she'd worked had been peaceful, hidden in the Outer Rim territories. When the raiders came, they'd taken everything: her colleagues, her life's work, her freedom. "Do I hear opening bids for this prime specimen?" The auctioneer called out. A hulking Vorthak with scarred chitin plates raised a clawed appendage. 500 credits. 600, growled a Saurian whose forked tongue flicked out hungrily. Kira forced herself to breathe slowly, a meditation technique she'd learned during her academic years. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. Not yet. The bidding continued, voices calling out increasingly higher amounts as if she were livestock. The Vorthak seemed determined to win, his small black eyes never leaving her form. 2,000 credits. The new voice was different, deeper, quieter, but somehow carrying across the entire marketplace. Kira looked up to spite herself and felt her blood freeze. A human stood near the back of the crowd, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a worn brown jacket over dark clothing. His face was weathered, marked by old scars that told stories of violence. His hair was dark with silver threading through it, and his eyes were the cold gray of a winter storm. The crowd had gone quiet. Everyone knew humans were among the galaxy's most efficient killers, their military prowess legendary. Even among species that had been spacefaring for millennia, what would a human want with a Zilani slave? 2,500, the Vorthak bid desperately. 3,000, the human replied without hesitation, his voice carrying that same unsettling calm. Kira's hands began to shake. She'd grown up on stories of human cruelty, their wars, their imperial expansion through the outer systems. They took what they wanted and crushed anything that stood in their way. The research colony had specifically chosen their remote location to avoid human trade routes. The Vorthak's mandibles clicked in frustration, but he stepped back. No one else dared bid higher. "Sold to Commander Kane for 3,000 credits, the auctioneer announced with obvious relief. Even he seemed nervous around the human. As the energy bars deactivated, Commander Kane approached with measured steps. Up close, Kira could see the details of his scarred features. A line that ran from his left temple to his jaw, smaller marks on his hands that spoke of combat experience. He was older than she'd first thought, probably in his mid-30s, with the kind of presence that suggested he'd seen more than his share of violence. "Stand up," he said quietly. Kira's legs trembled as she obeyed, the chains connecting her wrists to her ankles making any movement awkward. She waited for the blow, the harsh command, the beginning of whatever hell her life had become. Instead, Commander Kane pulled a small device from his pocket and aimed it at her restraints. The magnetic locks disengaged with soft clicks, and the chains clattered to the floor. Kira stared at her freed wrists in shock, barely noticing when Kane shrugged out of his brown jacket and held it out to her. "You'll want to cover up," he said, his gray eyes avoiding her form. "It's cold outside, and the clothing they gave you won't be enough." Still stunned, Kira took the jacket with numb fingers. It was warm from his body heat and smelled like engine oil and something else, something clean and oddly comforting. She wrapped it around herself, swimming in its size. "My ship's this way," Kane said, turning toward the market exit. He walked slowly, matching her uncertain pace rather than dragging her along as she'd expected. As they moved through the crowd, Kira noticed how other beings stepped aside for the human, their expressions wary but respectful. Kane seemed oblivious to the attention, his focus on navigating them through the marketplace's chaos. When a drunk Yathrani stumbled into their path and leered at Kira, Kane simply placed himself between them, his presence enough to send the alien scrambling away. They walked in silence through the market district and into the spaceport's docking bays. Kira's mind raced with questions and fears, but her voice seemed to have abandoned her. When they reached a mid-sized freighter that had seen better decades, Kane palmed the access panel and gestured for her to board first. "After you," he said simply. As the airlock cycled shut behind them, Kira found herself alone with her new owner in the narrow corridor of his ship. This was it. Whatever came next, whatever he intended to do with her, would happen here where no one could witness it. Commander Kane looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he spoke words that would echo in her mind for days to come. "The first thing you need to know is that you're safe here. The second thing is that I bought your freedom, not your servitude. What you do with that freedom is entirely up to you." Kira followed Commander Kane through the narrow corridors of his ship, her bare feet silent on the metal decking. The freighter was old but well-maintained, its walls lined with conduits and panels that hummed with steady power. Emergency lighting cast everything in a warm amber glow, so different from the harsh white glare of the slave pens. Kane stopped at a door marked with galactic standard symbols. "This is your quarters," he said, pressing his palm to the access panel. The door slid open to reveal a small but complete living space. A bed with clean linens, a compact desk, a private refresher unit, even a small viewport looking out at the stars. "I don't understand," Kira whispered, her first word since leaving the market. Her voice came out hoarse from disuse and fear. "The door locks from the inside only," Kane explained, stepping back to give her space. "There's a comm panel if you need anything. Meals are at 0800, 1200, and 1800 hours in the galley, but there's also a food synthesizer here if you prefer privacy." He paused, studying her face. "The ship jumps to hyperspace in 6 hours. After that, it's a 4-day journey to Haven's Rest." Haven's Rest. Kira had heard of it, one of the few truly free worlds in this sector, where no slavery existed and refugees could start new lives. "You're taking me there? If that's where you want to go." Kane's gray eyes were serious but not unkind. "There are other options: educational worlds, research stations, colonial settlements. Your choice." The concept of choice felt foreign after months of captivity. Kira stepped into the room, running her fingers along the clean bedding. "What's the catch?" she asked quietly. Kane was silent for a long moment. When she looked back at him, she saw something complicated cross his features. Pain, perhaps, or old grief. No catch, just one human trying to balance the scales a little. After he left, Kira explored her small sanctuary with wonder. The refresher had unlimited hot water, a luxury she hadn't experienced since the colony's destruction. She scrubbed away weeks of grime and fear, then found clean clothes laid out on the bed, simple ship suits in her size, soft undergarments, even comfortable boots. Everything practical and modest, chosen with consideration for her comfort rather than anyone else's pleasure. The food synthesizer produced a meal of spiced grain porridge with protein cubes, simple fare, but more nutritious than anything she'd eaten in captivity. As she ate, she gazed out the viewport at Zerion Prime's dusty surface, trying to process her new reality. Later, curiosity drew her from her quarters to explore the ship. The corridors were quiet, except for the steady thrum of engines. She passed what looked like other passenger quarters, some sealed, others open and clearly unoccupied. In the ship's common area, she found a small medical bay stocked with supplies for multiple species. Couldn't sleep either? Kira spun around to find Kane emerging from what appeared to be the ship's workshop, tools in his hands and grease on his fingers. He looked more relaxed than he had at the market. The harsh lines around his eyes softened slightly. She began, then stopped. She didn't owe him explanations, did she? "Ship's yours to explore," Kane said, settling at a workbench to clean his tools. Just avoid engineering during jump prep. The radiation shielding is cycling. Kira perched carefully on a nearby chair, studying this strange human who had upended every assumption she'd held about his species. Why do you do this? Buy slaves just to free them? Kane's hand stilled on the hydrospanner he was cleaning. For a moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, I had a daughter once, Emma. She was about your age when pirates hit our colony transport. His voice was steady, but Kira caught the tremor beneath it. I was deployed off-world, couldn't protect her. By the time I got there, he set down the tool carefully. They'd sold her to consortium slavers. I spent 3 years tracking the ship, but by then, the silence stretched between them, heavy with shared understanding of loss. I'm sorry, Kira said softly. Kane nodded acknowledgement. Military pension pays well. Figured I could use it for something that mattered. He looked at her directly. Every person I buy free is someone else's daughter, son, family member who gets to go home. But you could have saved dozens for what you paid for me, Kira pointed out. Younger slaves go for much less. You reminded me of her, Kane admitted quietly. Emma wanted to be a scientist, like you. She had your same expression when she was thinking hard about something, like she was trying to solve the universe's puzzles one piece at a time. Kira felt tears she'd been holding back for weeks finally spill over. Not tears of fear or despair, but something else entirely. Gratitude, relief, and a fragile beginning of hope. Kane stood up abruptly, clearly uncomfortable with emotional displays. You should rest. Tomorrow I'll show you the ship's database. It has educational materials if you want to catch up on recent scientific developments. As he headed toward the exit, Kira called after him. Commander Kane, thank you. For everything. He paused at the doorway. Just Kane is fine, and you don't need to thank me for doing what any decent being should do. Alone again, Kira returned to her quarters with a lighter heart than she'd carried in months. For the first time since her capture, she allowed herself to think about the future instead of just survival. As she settled into the comfortable bed, she realized Kane was wrong about one thing. She did need to thank him. Because in a galaxy where slavery was legal and cruelty was common, choosing kindness was actually extraordinary. The ship's gentle vibration as it jumped to hyperspace lulled her into the first peaceful sleep she'd had since losing her freedom. And for the first time in months, she dreamed not of chains and auction blocks, but of laboratories and discoveries yet to be made. The second day aboard Kane's ship found Kira in the medical bay, examining the sophisticated equipment with growing excitement. She'd discovered a fully functional bioscanner, cellular regeneration units, and even a small surgical suite, far beyond what most freighters carried. Finding everything you need? Kane's voice came from the doorway. Kira looked up from the medical database she'd been studying. This is military-grade equipment. How did you afford all this? Kane entered the bay, favoring his left leg slightly. Oh, details she'd noticed during their previous conversations. Salvaged most of it from decommissioned ships. The regeneration unit was a birthday gift to myself. He gestured to a long scar visible on his forearm. Turns out buying medical equipment is cheaper than constantly paying for treatment. You're injured frequently? Kira asked, her scientific curiosity overriding social caution. Hazard of the work. Not everyone appreciates having their property liberated. Kane settled onto one of the examination chairs with a slight grimace. Speaking of which, I've got 3 more passengers joining us at the next station. Brothers from Kepler the 7, whose mining contracts were illegally extended into slavery. As they spoke, Kira noticed Kane unconsciously massaging his left shoulder. The movement was subtle but practiced, the gesture of someone managing chronic pain. How long have you been doing this, the rescue missions? 4 years now. Started small. Bought a teenage Altarian whose owner was beating him half to death in a cantina. Kid reminded me too much of... Kane trailed off, but Kira understood. Of Emma. He nodded. Word gets around in certain circles. Now I have contacts. who tipped me off about particularly bad situations. That's how I heard about you. Dr. Kira Veltar, xenobiologist, being sold to the highest bidder by raiders who destroyed her research colony. Kira's breath caught. You knew who I was? I research every purchase. Makes it easier to help people figure out their next steps. Kane's gray eyes met hers. Your published papers on cross-species botanical adaptation were required reading in colonial development courses. Impressive work. The validation of her professional identity, something she'd thought lost forever, brought fresh tears to her eyes. I thought all of that was over. My research, my career, my purpose. Only, if you let it be. Kane stood, then paused as a spasm of pain crossed his features. His hand went to his shoulder again, pressing against what was clearly an old injury. Without thinking, Kira moved toward him. Let me look at that. Kane stepped back instinctively. It's fine, old war wound, nothing that can be fixed. I specialized in xenobiology, but I also have extensive medical training, Kira said gently. Cross-species physiology was part of my doctoral work. At least, let me scan it. After a moment's hesitation, Kane nodded and sat back down. Kira powered up the bioscanner, her hands steady for the first time in months as she fell back into familiar professional routines. The scanner revealed extensive scar tissue throughout Kane's shoulder and upper back, along with improperly healed fractures that were causing chronic inflammation. This was a plasma burn, she said, studying the readouts. Severe one. The initial treatment was competent, but you never had proper reconstructive therapy. Field hospital did what they could. I had to get back to searching for Emma. Kane's voice was matter-of-fact, but Kira heard the old pain beneath it. She began preparing the cellular regeneration unit. This will help with the inflammation and some of the nerve damage. It won't fix everything, but it should reduce your pain significantly. As the treatment began, Kane relaxed slightly under the soothing warmth. You don't have to do this. You don't owe me anything. Kira continued adjusting the settings with practiced precision. Maybe I don't owe you, but I want to help. You gave me back my purpose. Let me use my skills for something good again. They sat in comfortable silence as the machine worked. Kira found herself studying Kane's profile, noting the way tension gradually left his features as the pain eased. He wasn't classically handsome, too scarred, too weathered by grief and conflict. But there was something compelling about his quiet strength, his unwavering moral compass in a galaxy that seemed to have lost its way. Tell me about your research, Kane said eventually. What were you working on before the raiders came? Kira's face lit up as she described her work developing crops that could adapt to alien soil compositions, potentially revolutionizing colonial agriculture. Kane listened intently, asking thoughtful questions that revealed a keen intelligence beneath his soldier's exterior. I was close to a breakthrough, she concluded, a hybrid grain that could process trace minerals toxic to most Earth origin plants and convert them into essential nutrients. It could have fed millions of colonists on previously uninhabitable worlds. Could still feed them, Kane pointed out. Your notes might be gone, but the knowledge is still in your head. The regeneration treatment completed with a soft chime. Kane rotated his shoulder experimentally, his eyes widening at the increased range of motion. That's remarkable. The pain is almost gone. The treatment will need to be repeated several times for maximum effectiveness, Kira said, powering down the equipment. I could continue helping you if you'd like. Kane met her gaze, and for a moment, something unspoken passed between them. I'd like that, but only if you're choosing to stay, not because you feel obligated. I'm choosing, Kira said firmly. You've shown me that there are still good people in the galaxy, people worth fighting for. Maybe I can't go back to my old research facility, but I can continue the work in other ways. Help you help others. Kane smiled then, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him. It transformed his stern features, revealing glimpses of the man he might have been before loss and war hardened him. Welcome aboard, Dr. Veltar. As they prepared to leave the medical bay, Kane paused. Kira, thank you. Not just for the treatment, but for choosing to trust me. I know that couldn't have been easy. Kira considered his words, thinking of all the assumptions she'd held about humans, all the fear and propaganda that had shaped her expectations. You've shown me that choosing to trust can lead to something beautiful, she said softly. Maybe it's time I stopped letting fear make my decisions. That night, as the ship hummed steadily through hyperspace toward their next destination, both Kira and Kane slept better than they had in years. The healing had begun, not just of old wounds, but of old hearts learning to hope again. The trading station at Nexus Point hummed with activity as beings from dozens of species conducted business in the neutral territory. Kane had docked for supplies and to transfer their 3 rescued passengers, the Kepler 7 brothers who were finally returning home to families they'd thought they'd never see again. Kira stood in the observation deck watching the emotional reunion through the station's transparent aluminum viewing ports. The youngest brother, barely 18, was sobbing in his father's arms while his siblings were swept up by wives and children who had waited years for their return. Second thoughts? Kane asked, joining her at the viewport. They'd been traveling together for 6 weeks now, and the dynamic between them had shifted into something deeper than rescuer and rescued. Kira had become his partner in every sense, helping with the medical needs of rescued passengers, managing communications with their growing network of contacts, even assisting with ship repairs. About staying with you? Kira shook her head. No, but watching them reunite with their families makes me think about what I lost. My research team, my colleagues, they were family to me. Kane's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining naturally. The gesture had become common between them, these small touches that spoke of growing intimacy and trust. I'm sorry you lost them, but you've honored their memory by continuing the work, by helping others. In the weeks since leaving Xerion, Prime Kira had indeed continued her research, adapting her knowledge to help improve nutrition synthesizers for rescued slaves who often suffered from severe malnutrition. She'd also been treating Kane's old injuries, the cellular regeneration therapy gradually healing wounds he'd carried for years. The station quartermaster has the supplies we need, Kane said, but he made no move to leave. We could stay here a few days if you want to explore. Maybe visit the academic section. They have a research library that might interest you. Kira turned to face him fully, studying his expression. Or I could stay here permanently, find work at one of the research facilities, start rebuilding my career. Something flickered in Kane's gray eyes. Hope, fear, resignation. If that's what you want, I told you the choice was yours. Instead of answering immediately, Kira moved closer to him, close enough to see the faint lines around his eyes, the small scar on his chin she'd treated weeks ago. What do you want, Kane? That's not a fair question, he said quietly. I bought your freedom. What I want shouldn't factor into your decision. But it does factor in because over these weeks you've become important to me. Kira reached up to trace the scar along his temple, her touch gentle. You've given me back my sense of purpose, my belief that there's still good in the galaxy. But more than that, you've given me something I didn't expect to find again. What's that? Love, she said simply. Kane's breath caught. Kira, I'm 15 years older than you. I'm a broken-down soldier with more ghosts than future. You could have anything, anyone. She silenced him by pressing her lips to his, soft and sure. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, then deepened, as Kane's arms came around her. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. I could have anyone, Kira agreed, her violet eyes bright with unshed tears. But I choose you. Not because I owe you, not because I'm grateful, but because you make me want to be brave again. Because when I think about my future, I see you. In it. Kane rested his forehead against hers. I love you too. God help me, I've been fighting it for weeks, but I love you. Then stop fighting it, Kira whispered. We've both lost enough, Kane. Maybe it's time we let ourselves have something good. That night, in Kane's quarters aboard the ship, They made love with a tenderness born of mutual understanding of loss and healing. Kira had been afraid that intimacy might trigger memories of her captivity, but Kane's hands were patient and gentle, asking permission with every touch, every kiss. When she took the lead, showing him without words that she was choosing this, choosing him, the last walls between them crumbled completely. Afterward, as they lay entwined in the narrow bunk, Kane traced patterns on her silver-blue skin. "I want you to know that if you ever change your mind, if you ever want something different—" "Stop," Kira said firmly. "I'm not going anywhere. This is where I belong with you doing this work. We're good together, Kane. As partners, as lovers, as a team." Kane pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her hair. "What about your research? Your career?" "I can research anywhere there's a laboratory, but I can only save lives with you." Kira propped herself up to look at him seriously. "I've been thinking about expansion. What if we got a bigger ship, set up a proper medical facility? We could treat rescued slaves, help them recover physically and psychologically before they return to freedom." Kane's eyes lit up with the same passion she'd seen when he talked about their rescue missions. "A mobile medical station. We could coordinate with other rescue operations, provide support throughout the sector." "Exactly. Use my scientific background and your tactical expertise to make a real difference," Kira smiled. "I may have lost my original research, but this could be even more important." They spent the rest of the night planning their future, sketching designs for their expanded operation, discussing the logistics of creating a network of rescue ships and support vessels. As dawn broke through the station's artificial lighting cycles, they made official what their hearts had already decided. "So we're partners now," Kane said, holding her close. "In every sense of the word." "Partners," Kira agreed, sealing the promise with a kiss. 6 months later, as they prepared to marry in a simple ceremony aboard their new vessel, a converted medical frigate they'd christened Second Chances, Kira reflected on how much their lives had changed. What had begun as a desperate purchase at a slave market had become a love story that defied every expectation. Kane had been right about one thing. He'd bought her freedom. But what he hadn't anticipated was that in freeing her, she would free him as well. From his guilt, his isolation, his belief that he was too broken to deserve happiness. As they exchanged vows surrounded by former slaves who had become their chosen family, Kira knew that they'd found something rare in the galaxy. A love built on choice, respect, and shared purpose. Together they would continue saving lives, one rescued soul at a time. 1 year after their wedding, Dr. Kira Kane stood in the medical bay of their expanded vessel, her hand resting on the gentle curve of her growing belly. At 6 months pregnant, she still insisted on participating in their rescue operations, though Kane had become increasingly protective as her due date approached. "The neural activity scans show complete recovery," she told their latest patient, a young Andorian whose previous owners had used neural inhibitors to control him. "The pathways should regenerate fully within another week." The boy, barely 20, by Andorian standards, looked at her with reverence that still made Kira uncomfortable. To many of the beings they rescued, she and Kane had become legendary figures, symbols of hope in a galaxy where such things were rare. "Thank you, Dr. Kane," the boy said in accented standard, "for everything. When I heard humans had rescued me, I thought—" He trailed off, clearly embarrassed. "You thought we'd be monsters," Kira finished gently. "I understand. I had the same reaction when Kane first bought my freedom." "Really?" The boy's bioluminescent patches flickered with surprise. "Really? But I learned that judging any species by their worst examples is a mistake. There are good and evil individuals in every race. What matters is choosing to be good when you have the power to be otherwise." After the boy left to join his therapy group, Kira found Kane in their private quarters reviewing intelligence reports from their network of contacts. Their operation had grown beyond their wildest dreams. They now coordinated with dozens of independent rescue vessels, funded medical facilities on 5 different worlds, and had personally freed over 300 enslaved beings. "Anything urgent?" she asked, settling beside him on their small couch. Kane set aside the datapad and pulled her close, his hand joining hers on her belly. Nothing that can't wait. How are you feeling? Like I'm carrying a future star pilot who's already practicing barrel rolls. Kira laughed as their child kicked energetically. Kane, we need to talk about taking maternity leave. I've been thinking the same thing. I know you don't want to stop working, but... An urgent chime from the communications array interrupted him. Kane frowned as he accepted the incoming transmission, his expression growing grim as he listened to the coded message. What is it? Kira asked, reading the tension in his shoulders. Slavers have been asking questions about us at Zerion Prime, specifically about the human and his Zilani wife, who've been interfering with their operations. Kane's jaw tightened. They're tracking our movements, Kira. It's not safe for us to continue operations while you're pregnant. Before Kira could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Kane was on his feet instantly, grabbing weapons from their secure locker as crew members' voices crackled over the comm system. Captain, we've got 4 vessels dropping out of hyperspace, came the urgent report from their bridge crew. Configuration matches consortium slaver ships. They're jamming our communications and moving to intercept. Kira struggled to her feet, her pregnancy making quick movements difficult. They found us. Kane was already strapping on body armor, his expression shifting into the focused calm she'd seen during their most dangerous rescues. Emergency Protocol 7. Get to the medical bay and prepare for casualties. Kane, I'm not leaving you. You're not just responsible for yourself anymore, he said firmly, his hands cupping her face. Our child needs at least one parent to survive this. The ship shuddered as energy weapons impacted their shields. Through their viewport, Kira could see the sleek, predatory shapes of consortium vessels closing in, their weapons charging for another volley. I love you, Kane said, kissing her fiercely. Both of you. As Kane rushed toward the bridge, Kira made her way to the medical bay where their rescued passengers were already gathering. Fear was evident on every face. Most of these beings had lived through the horror of enslavement and couldn't bear the thought of returning to it. Dr. Kane called out Zira, a teenage Rigelin they'd rescued months ago. What's happening? Before Kira could answer, the ship's defensive systems engaged, filling the air with the whine of energy weapons and the thunder of mass drivers. She could hear Kane's voice over the comm system, coordinating their response with the calm professionalism that had made him a legendary soldier. Evasive maneuvers. Bring us about to heading 27 Mark IV. Return fire. Target their propulsion systems. The battle raged for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. Kira found herself treating minor injuries from the ship's violent maneuvering while trying to keep their passengers calm. Then, suddenly, the weapons fire stopped. Kane's voice came over the comm, strained but victorious. All hostiles disabled or destroyed. Medical teams to Deck 7, we have wounded crew members. Kira was already moving, grabbing medical supplies despite the concerned protests of their passengers. She found Kane in Corridor 7, applying pressure to a plasma burn on their navigator's shoulder. How bad? She asked, immediately taking over treatment. Could have been worse. They were expecting an easy target. Didn't count on our defensive upgrades. Kane helped her stabilize their injured crew member. But Kira, they knew exactly where to find us. Someone's been tracking our operations. Over the following hours, as they dealt with repairs and treated the wounded, the full scope of their situation became clear. The consortium had placed a substantial bounty on their heads, specifically identifying Kane as a terrorist and Kira as a stolen slave and criminal accomplice. We can't continue like this, Kane said as they met with their senior staff. Every rescue operation puts our people at risk, and with the baby coming, we don't stop, Kira said firmly. We adapt. Go underground, work with smaller ships, delegate more operations to other teams. Kira, no, Kane. These people, she gestured to their crew, most of whom were former slaves. They're our family. This work is our legacy. I won't let fear stop us from saving lives. 3 months later, Kira gave birth to their daughter aboard their hidden base on Sanctuary Station, a neutral facility that had become the unofficial headquarters for their anti-slavery network. As she held tiny Emma Kane, named for the child Kane had lost, She felt the completion of a circle that had begun in the slave markets of Zerion Prime. Kane sat beside them, his weathered face soft with wonder as he touched his daughter's perfect fingers. "She's beautiful," he whispered. "She's going to grow up in a galaxy where slavery is illegal," Kira said with quiet determination. "Where beings like us don't have to choose between love and freedom." "Think we can make that happen?" Kane asked. Kira looked around at their chosen family, former slaves who had become freedom fighters, outcasts who had found purpose, broken people who had healed each other through shared compassion. Their network now spanned dozens of systems, and their success had inspired countless others to join the fight against slavery. "With her as our inspiration?" Kira smiled, pressing a kiss to their daughter's forehead. "I think we can change the galaxy." As their ship prepared to launch on another rescue mission, this time with a full nursery and childcare staff, Kira reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. She'd been sold as a slave, bought by a stranger, and discovered that sometimes the greatest chains are the ones we place on our own hearts. Kane had taught her that freedom isn't just about breaking physical bonds, it's about choosing to trust, to love, to hope for something better. And now, as they held their daughter and planned their next rescue operation, they knew that their greatest victory wasn't the hundreds of lives they'd saved. It was proving that in a galaxy full of darkness, choosing kindness could indeed light the way to freedom. The end.